My downstairs neighbor texted me that I was being too loud. I wasn't home. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I was out at a bar, about 3.5 cosmopolitans deep. Tipsy, maybe somewhat pickled, but not totally gone. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. I had one new text from my downstairs neighbor who texted me very seldomly. "Could you quit stomping around up there, please? It's very late." I sensed the aggression in her tone. One time, I held a messy party on a Wednesday night and actually received a noise complaint from my landlord, whom she had spilled the beans to. Since then, I was cautious not to be too noisy. I stepped lightly. I told any guests to leave at a reasonable time. This was odd, though, considering the fact that I wasn't even home. In fact, the bar I was in was about 4 cities over from my apartment anyway. I wasn't even in town. "What do you mean?" I texted back. "I'm not home." My phone buzzed again before I even had time to fully put it away in my pocket. "I can hear you up there, and whoever else is with you. Please. It is very late, and I am trying to sleep." At this point, I slipped away from my friend group, all dancing, drinking, and partying, and headed outside. All the smokers were outside. I just hoped none of the men made any unsolicited remarks on my body while I was out there. There just seems to be something about a group of drunk men versus an unaccompanied tipsy woman. It's like they can't help themselves. They just have to say something. I heard a whistle from beside me. I walked a little further to get away from them and heard a "Hey, sexy" from behind me. I dared not respond with even a look in their direction. The task at hand was to call my neighbor. Hopefully, I wouldn't come across as totally delirious. Just for a little while at least, I had to mask the subtle drunkenness. She answered the phone within seconds of me dialing. "Hey," I said. "Could you just please quiet down?" she said, obviously frustrated and exhausted. "I'm telling you, really, I'm not home." "Okay, then who is? 'Cause clearly someone is stomping around up there." "No one. Seriously. I left earlier today and will be back tomorrow. I can completely assure you the place is empty." I could tell she didn't believe me. "Here," I said. "Just FaceTime me for a second." "Fine," she replied. She joined the FaceTime call and I showed her my surroundings. I gave her a look that said, "See?" I think she was probably in bed. It was too dark where she was to actually get a clear look at her face. "Oh," she said, her voice reflecting that she suddenly believed me. "You're sure no one is up there while you're away?" "I'm sure. Really no one is there. Maybe you're hearing the next suite over or something." "Maybe," she said. "Have a good night." "You too," I told her, my tone annoyed with her pestering. We hung up. I walked back by the smokers and let myself back into the bar. I ignored any subsequent catcalling as I did so. It took a second to find my friends again. The music was loud and the lights were flashing. Once they saw me, I saw their hands go up. I waved back enthusiastically and rejoined the group. We continued dancing and drinking the night away. Hours later, we all fell sloppily into our hotel room. In a drunken pile, we slept until our wake-up alarm in the morning. After a complimentary breakfast at the hotel, we hit the road. I was last to be dropped off. My chauffeur of a best friend pulled up to my apartment. Ensuring we'd do that again sometime and have nights out more frequently, we said our goodbyes and she drove away as my key opened the main doors. Next, I let myself into my suite on the 4th floor. Good old 412. And I walked into such disaster and disarray that I stepped back outside to make sure I had entered the correct suite. There on the door in gold lettering were the numbers 412. Yup, I was home. I flicked on a light and carefully explored my now unfamiliar surroundings. Dishes and cups had fallen to the floor and smashed, raining shards of glass all over. 2 knives stuck into the wall right beside where my family portrait hung, which looked like it had been scribbled over with Sharpie. Blankets and pillows in the living area had an assortment of goo on them that I was afraid to touch, but I noticed it gave off a metallic smell. I explored further, eyes bulging and muscles tensed. In the bathroom, the sink was plugged with a pair of my socks and filled with water. I found 3 more pairs of socks in the toilet and 2 in the garbage. In my bedroom, the final area I had to search, more of that weird goo littered my bed, some of it dripping onto the floor and becoming crusty in the carpet. My socks and underwear drawer had obviously been rifled through. I had about $250 of cash in my currency kept in my room as well. It was always stored safely in my bedside table, which had a lock on it. I found the cash in my sock drawer. The cash had obviously been moved, but none of it was taken. In a panic, I called my downstairs neighbor again. "Hello?" she answered. "What did you hear last night? What did it sound like? Someone has been in my suite." There was a pause of silence before she spoke again. "Huh?" she asked. "Last night, when you said there were noises coming from my suite." Again, a pause. Then she spoke. "I didn't hear anything last night, Sorry to be unable to help, but I've been away on vacation for the past week. I don't get back until Thursday, so, I really can't help you out here, sorry. I ran my hand through my hair. I felt disoriented in a way that no amount of alcohol has never made me feel. No, I said. You called me last night. I assure you I did not. Look, I gotta go. I'm sorry you were robbed or whatever, but I'm a 4-hour plane ride away. I can't help. Completely confused, I managed to stutter a quick, "Oh, okay," before I heard her hang up the phone. Suddenly, I felt something fall onto my head. It was a sock.
My mom refused to buy me acne cream, so I deported her. I, 17 female, met Jeremy in my second year of high school. Although we weren't dating, I wanted to change that. He always knew how much I hated my skin. It was so horrible. I knew I would look attractive if I could just get rid of these pimples, but every time I looked in the mirror it seemed like another one would pop up on my face. I tried different creams and masks but nothing worked. Whenever I would ask Jeremy if he liked my skin, he would always say that it looked fine. I knew he wasn't too keen on it and that just made it worse. I knew I had to get rid of all of these pimples in my face before I asked him to buy my senior prom. I wanted everything to be perfect. I bought a nice dress, I got a nice haircut, but of course I just kept getting more and more pimples. I looked terrible. Then my friend told me about this acne cream she had used. She said it worked like magic. She said she put it on and her pimples went away overnight. The only problem was it was $350. There was no way I could afford that on my salary. I literally worked at McDonald's every day after school. But I knew my mother would be able to afford it. I asked my mother if she could help pay for my acne cream. My mother was from El Salvador. She had been in the country for 20 years, but she was still old-fashioned. She didn't believe in a lot of modern medicine. My mom said that she would never buy some $350 scam. She said that I should put aloe vera on my face. I had tried that before and it didn't work. Then she said she could barely see my pimples anyway. She said I was perfect the way I was. Meanwhile, I wanted to go to the prom with Jeremy, my football player crush. There was no way he would go with me when I had pimples all over my face, and I would look so terrible on the day of the prom he wouldn't even dance with me. Fast forward to 3 days before I was gonna ask Jeremy to go to prom, I still had all of these pimples. This enraged me, and it's all my mother's fault. I told her if she didn't buy me the acne cream I would get her deported. She was in the country illegally. She never got her visa or citizenship. It was hard to believe that she had been in the country for 2 decades and never got caught. I guess she was lucky, but she wasn't going to be so lucky now. When I told my mother I would have her deported, she didn't take me seriously. She thought I was joking, but I was dead serious. She wasn't going to call my bluff. One day when she wasn't home, I called INS. I told them my mother had been living in the country illegally for 20 years. I gave them all her information, her name, address, everything. A part of me didn't think they would follow through, but a few days later a knock came on the door. It was INS. They took my mother away in handcuffs. She was crying and saying, "How could you do this to me?" I was shocked, but I guess it serves her right for not letting me have my acne cream. Am I the jerk?
In my town, you don't look out of your window at night. Ever since I was a toddler, my parents would always tell me, "Don't look out the window at night." I always asked them why, but they shrugged it off with a smile and a simple because. As I got older, I stopped questioning it and did what they said. I assumed it was normal everywhere else, since every person I knew did the same. When I turned 18, I moved out of town for college. It was during Christmas break of my second year when I found out the reason behind the town's strange tradition. The first night at my parents' house, I remember them telling me not to look out the window. I gave a smile and a small chuckle before telling them I wouldn't. However, curiosity struck me the moment they left the room. At college, other people looked out their windows at night without a care in the world. I didn't know what the big deal was. As I lay in the dark, I came to a decision. I would look out of the window. It wasn't that big of a deal. Just as my hand came to the sheer white curtain of the guest room, I paused. My mind flashed to that one time when I was 12. My parents were talking in the kitchen. I was home with the flu and was about to make my way to the sink for some water, but I stopped at the doorway. I hid behind the wall, peeking my head out from the doorway just an inch. My mother was crying, and my father was holding her and rocking. "That poor little girl. I feel horrible for her family," whispered my mother. My father just nodded and continued holding her. I went back to my room after that. Several hours later, my dad came up to my room with several 2x4s and boarded up my windows. "What are you doing that for, Dad?" I asked him. "Oh, it's nothing. Just safety reasons," he replied. I learned at school the next day that a little girl, a classmate's sister, was found dead the previous morning, the window broken and curtains torn. My hand drew back from the curtain. I shook my head, cursing myself for being so weird. What was the worst that could happen? It was just a window. It couldn't hurt me. As I reached my hand out again, my instinct was telling, no, shouting, at me to stop. My gut twisted as I reached nearer and nearer. Just as I touched the curtain, a painful howl came from the forest surrounding the house. I flinched back, deciding to just lay down and try to get some sleep. I forgot how hard it was to get sleep in my hometown. Every night, coyotes howled for hours, everywhere in town. The next night, I woke up in a cold sweat. I glanced over at the alarm clock next to my bed. It was midnight. I groaned and sat up in bed. A low growling sounded from outside of my bedroom window. I thought back to last night and decided that I had made up my mind about looking out. I thrusted my arm towards the curtain and pulled back hard, almost ripping it away from the rod. I flattened myself against the wall next to the bed for a moment before I put one eye in front of the window. I immediately regretted my decision as I heard claws clacking up the house. I flung myself out of bed, tumbling on the floor. I stood up and got back up on the bed. I stuck my face closer to the window as the clacking got closer and closer. It suddenly stopped for a second before the most horrible creature popped up from outside, emitting a horrible shriek as it did so. I can never forget its face, the way the hollow eyes oozed some kind of black substance, like tar, and the way its lips were pulled back into a gruesome grin, the teeth blood-stained and razor-sharp. It looked like it had 4 limbs, its front 2 slamming on the glass and pounding. As I was frozen in front of the window in terror, my parents burst into the room. My father held a shotgun. He marched up to my bed and yanked me away from the window. He pointed his shotgun at the creature, shooting a bullet at it. The thing scrambled away, leaving the window almost completely shattered. "Damn it, son. It was a simple task. Just don't look out the window. How hard is that?" my dad shouted at me. I wasn't processing his words. I was sitting on the floor, arms and legs splayed everywhere in utter shock. What the hell had I just seen? My mother ran to the bedroom door. She had tears in her eyes. "Is everyone all right?" she asked. "Yeah, we're fine. We still gotta get that creepy fucking monster, though." "Nathan, get up. We got some work to do," my dad said. I got up as soon as I could. My dad thrust the shotgun into my arms and marched downstairs. He opened the basement door and descended, coming back with a machete and some kind of spray bottle. He sprayed the liquid onto the machete before walking to the front door in wait. "Dad, what are you doing?" I asked, confused. I was just traumatized, and now my dad is waiting at the door, machete in hand like he was about to kill someone. Instead of a response, my dad just hushed me. The house was quiet for several seconds before a loud banging and howling came at the front door. We heard a rip, and we knew the screen door was no more. The wood of the interior door started to splinter, and I took a few steps backward. My dad glared at me. "Nathan, now is not the time for this. Point the goddamn gun and get ready to shoot." I aimed the gun at the door, trying to find the spot where the howling was coming from. The door was strong, but it wasn't indestructible. The creature burst through the door, and I pulled the trigger in a moment of terrified panic. My dad knelt down and brought his machete down on the abomination's head. The howling ceased, and my mom rushed forward with a tarp to cover the spot where the door was destroyed. "Honey, are you okay?" my mom asked for the second time that night. She came up to me and kissed my cheeks, as if to make sure I was still there. She went over to my dad and did the same. "We're okay, Martha. Both of you, get in the basement. I gotta clean this up." "Basement? Why the basement?" I asked. Everything was going by at the speed of light, and I couldn't help but question everything that was happening at the moment. "Let's just get in the basement. Your father needs to clean up," my mom said, grabbing my arm and pulling me to the basement. We sat on the couch down there for what seemed like hours before my dad came in and put the machete up. He sat on the chair in front of us with an exhausted sigh. The 3 of us sat in silence for a few minutes. In that time span, my brain was able to come up with a coherent sentence. "Dad, what was that thing?" He just looked up at me, eyes dark, and said, "Where do you think that howling came from?"
My mother-in-law expected me to pay rent, so I kicked her out and now her house is mine. Me and my mother-in-law never got along. She always insulted me behind my back. She gave me backward compliments and would do anything to make me feel absolutely terrible about myself, even admitting it to my face. My husband and I were married for a couple of years when my mother-in-law got sick. She had diabetes. My husband wanted to move in with her so we could take care of her. I didn't want to do it, but he was very insistent. His mother-in-law has a history of homelessness, and now that she has diabetes, it was just her and her dog living there, so he wanted to give her some company. And I knew he'd blame me if anything happened to her. So I said okay. The only upside for me was that we wouldn't have to pay rent. When my husband and I moved in, we learned we would be staying in my husband's former bedroom. It wasn't even the biggest bedroom in the house. His mother slept in the master bedroom alone since her husband had died several years before. The bedroom was also in need of repair. The carpet was dingy, the wallpaper was peeling, and there was only one small window, and her cute but smelly dog thought our chair was the toilet. To make things worse, she informed us that we would have to pay rent for this crappy room. The price she said was nearly as much as we had been spending on the cushy apartment that we had to leave behind. We would be paying over $1,000 to live there. Well, we went on this way for a few months, and after a while, even my husband was starting to get sick of my mother-in-law. She demanded things from him constantly, even in the middle of the night. He would wake up tired every day. She also berated him daily. If he didn't get something for her quickly enough, it was his fault. She would also pick on him randomly, saying he wasn't as good as his brother and that he was stupid and unskilled. I became a part of the miserable backdrop. She gave me dirty looks constantly. She demanded things from me when my husband wasn't around. She called me the pig my husband settled for. Finally, we decided we had enough. We were desperate to be rid of my mother-in-law no matter the consequences. We started snooping around the house to find our best out. We learned the landlord had a very strict no-animal policy. Bingo. We told the landlord about my mother-in-law's dog, and even took the dog with us when we went to speak to him. He evicted my mother-in-law right there and then. We offered if we could live there instead, and he's super enthusiastic. It's been 3 years, and we actually purchased the house from the landlord. Meanwhile, my mother has nowhere to go. No one is taking her in. The last I heard, she was living in a shelter. Good thing the dog was given to a relative and is safe though. So am I the jerk?